All right, let's dive into this. Status, right? This deep dive is about the deep down reasons why we even care about status in the first place. You gave us this lecture, and it's chock full of fascinating insights on, like, the psychology, evolution, how it plays out in stories we love.
Really makes you think about those classic hero stories in a whole new way.
Oh, absolutely. Even just the examples from the lecture Death Wish, Breaking Bad.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about rooting for the underdog, right?
Even when they're booking meth.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing about that hero's journey, right?
It taps into that really human desire to see someone go from zero to hero.
Yeah, that trajectory.
The lecture made this point that I thought was really interesting, that most people actually feel like they have less status than they deserve.
Oh, interesting.
It's just part of the human experience.
We're all walking around feeling a little slighted.
Yeah, we're not getting our due.
So then we see Walter White, right? Starts as this mild-mannered chemistry teacher.
Yeah, totally average guy.
And suddenly he's amassing all this power, this wealth, even if it's,
through not so legal means. You're still rooting for him.
Why is that?
It speaks to that desire for upward mobility, that if he can do it, maybe I can too, kind of feeling. It's about that primal desire to beat the odds.
Like this really deep-seated human thing.
Exactly. And it's not just a modern thing. The lecture mentioned how this hero narrative structure, it pops up
Everywhere.
all different cultures, different time periods.
It's like universal.
It goes back to our evolutionary past.
Let's go there.
Because for our ancestors, status wasn't just about bragging rights. It was about survival. Higher status meant better resources, better mates, better protection from threats.
It was essential.
Essential.
When we're glued to the screen, watching a movie and cheering on that hero, it's like this echo of our past.
Yeah, it's this primal instinct.
Urging us to climb that social ladder.
Precisely. It makes you think, right?
It does. And it makes you realize that this drive to improve our standing, it's not just about enjoying a good story. It affects how we interact with each other.
Oh, wow.
Even how we communicate. The lecture suggested that storytelling itself could be a form of status display.
Okay. Now that I got to hear more about.
Researchers found that people who are good storytellers, especially artists and writers, they have more romantic partners.
So you're saying if I write a best-selling novel, my dating life is going to be laughs.
Amazing.
Not necessarily. It's more about what those skills represent.
Okay.
Because crafting a compelling story takes creativity, intelligence, wit.
Okay, sure.
All traits that might signal to a potential partner.
Yeah.
That you've got something special going on.
So it's not about the story itself. It's like...
It's the signal.
What it says about you as the storyteller.
Yeah.
Like a big neon sign flashing. I'm clever and interesting.
Exactly. It's like this subconscious signal of your genetic fitness.
Fascinating.
Like your ability to navigate the world, social dynamics, all of that.
So even our everyday conversations, gossiping, telling a funny story at a party,
All of it.
it's all part of this whole status dance.
Think about the last time you told a story and everyone laughed. It felt good, right?
Yeah.
On an evolutionary level, you were demonstrating your wit, social intelligence, showing your value to the group.
It's amazing how much is going on beneath the surface of everything.
It makes you look at things a little differently.
It really does. Makes you realize every interaction has all these hidden layers, right?
We're all playing this game of social chess, almost.
Totally. And speaking of games, the lecture goes into these status games, which I thought was so interesting. It's not always about being the loudest one in the room. There's more to it.
It's more nuanced than that.
The lecture broke it down into these three main games, right? Dominance, virtue, and success.
I think that's really helpful because we often think of, oh, dominance, that's just like the alpha dog, right?
Right.
But the lecture really highlighted how each of these plays a role really subtle ways.
In all our interactions.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we talked about dominance, that drive to be top dog. What about this virtue game? That sounds almost nice at first.
Yeah, like being a good person, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The lecture highlighted how even virtue can get a little twisted.
Oh, okay.
It can become its own kind of status competition.
You mean when someone's got to prove how morally superior they are?
It's like moral grandstanding, right? It's using moral arguments to elevate your own status, often at the expense of others.
And that less about actually being a good person and more about just seeming like one. Right?
It's about the social currency, right? Looking good rather than doing good.
Totally. And the lecture pointed out that it's not just a left-wing thing or a right-wing thing, or everybody does it.
It's a human thing.
We all want to be the good guy, whatever that means, in our own little world. But then the lecture took this even further into the realm of victimhood, which I thought was a touchy subject.
It is a sensitive topic.
It's important, right? Because the lecture talked about how some people might exploit our empathy. We naturally want to help people who've been wronged.
Yeah.
Some people might take advantage of that.
It's not that we shouldn't believe victims or offer support, but that there's this potential for it to be used in a manipulative way.
It's more about being aware, right, that it can be used that way.
Okay, that makes sense.
We're hardwired to want to help, but not everyone's always on the up and up.
And speaking of not on the up and up, that part of the lecture about those old medical treatments, like the bloodletting and leeches.
That was interesting, wasn't it?
I did not see that coming. What does that have to do with status? It seems so out of left field. But the lecture proposed this idea that those really unpleasant treatments might have actually served as a form of...
Okay, I'm not sure I follow.
If you're truly deathly ill, you'll do anything for a chance at recovery, right?
Yeah.
If you're faking a headache to get out of work, you're probably not going to volunteer for bloodletting, right?
No, it's like a test.
It's a way of separating out the people who are truly in need from those who might be trying to game the system.
Wow. That's wild. Even something as bizarre as bloodletting can be tied back to this idea of status and signaling.
Exactly. And it suggests that even these cultural practices that seem really strange to us now, they might have developed for reasons that we don't always consciously recognize.
There's this whole other layer of meaning beneath the surface.
Exactly.
Okay, that's mind-blowing. We've got dominance, virtue, and then the lecture gets into the third status game, which is success.
Right.
And that one, on the surface, seems pretty straightforward, like work hard, achieve your goals, and boom, you've got status.
Yeah.
But of course, we know it's never that simple, right?
Oh, never.
So what makes the success game so complicated?
It's not just about being successful, right? It's also about how you present that success to the world.
How you play it.
And the lecture talked about this concept of countersignaling, which I found fascinating.
Tell me more, because that sounds like a game I want to win.
Countersignaling is basically when someone who's already high status, they do things that might seem low status, but because they've already got that established position, it actually reinforces their status even more.
They're so cool, they don't even have to try. That effortless confidence kind of thing.
It's like projecting this air of, I'm so successful, I don't even need to try so hard.
Oh, I love it.
The lecture gave the example of a Pizza Hut employee biking to work versus the CEO of Pizza Hut biking to work.
Okay.
One implies necessity.
Yeah.
The other implies choice.
I'm choosing to live this simple life, even though I could have a limo if I wanted.
Exactly. And you see it in little ways all the time, right? A CEO who dresses casually.
Yeah.
Or a famous chef who cooks simple meals at home.
My status is so secure, I don't need to flash it around.
Precisely. The lecture also warned that countersignaling can backfire, especially if it's not genuine.
Oh, so if you're still, like, climbing the ladder and trying to prove yourself,
Right.
it's going to come across.
Exactly. You're trying too hard.
So you gotta earn those status points before you can start giving them away. You got to earn it.
Okay, so it's a delicate dance.
It really is. And it just shows how complex all these status games are. And we're all playing them, even if we don't realize it.
It's all happening under the surface.
It's like we're all in this constant state of subconscious status negotiation.
The lecture brought up this interesting point about what happens when that pecking order gets murky.
Like when it's not clear who have more status.
It's called status ambiguity, and it can actually lead to more conflict, not less.
See, I would thought things would be calmer if nobody quite knows who's in charge.
Research actually suggests the opposite. When it's unclear who has higher status, it can create space for challenges and power struggles.
Oh, interesting. So it's like that awkward moment when you and someone else are trying to go through a door at the same time, and you're both doing that whole after you dance.
Exactly.
Neither of you wants to, like, assume a higher status.
It's that uncertainty that can cause tension. The lecture made this really interesting comparison to the animal kingdom.
Okay.
They were saying how animals of vastly different sizes rarely fight. It's when they're closely matched, that's when the competition heats up.
That's a good point.
Because it's about resources, right?
Yeah.
And dominance. When it's not clear who's got the upper hand, things can get dicey.
So we need those signals, even if they're subtle, to maintain some kind of social harmony.
Exactly.
Who gets to pick the movie, all those little things.
It's about maintaining order.
Okay, so we've covered so much in this, from the hero's journey to these subtle signals we send, even the evolutionary reasons we might care about who gets the bigger office. But it makes you feel like, are we just hardwired for this? Are we destined to be stuck in these status games forever?
Yeah, it can feel disheartening to think about it that way. But I think the biggest takeaway here, at least for me, is that true status, the kind that actually matters, it's not about manipulation or one-upping everyone else. It's about bringing something valuable to the table,
Okay.
offering something to the world.
Not stepping on others to climb the ladder, but using your own skills, your passions to make a difference.
Finding that fulfillment in contributing your best self.
I like that. Whether it's through your work, relationships, your community, that's where real status comes from.
It's less about external validation, it's more about the internal stuff. Are you living a life that feels meaningful to you?
Exactly. When you focus on that, the status often just follows naturally.
Yeah, it's like a byproduct of actually living a good life.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been pretty insightful, I gotta say. We've covered so much ground,
It's been a journey.
from ancient medical practices to what we're signaling when we post on Instagram.
It's connected, right?
It's amazing how all these pieces, like from storytelling to countersignaling, they all kind of paint this bigger picture of like what makes us human.
And why we do the things we do. Exactly. Here's a final thought for you before we wrap up.
Mhm.
If we become more aware of these status games, all the subtle ways we play them every single day, can we actually choose to opt out? Or are we hardwired to seek our place in the hierarchy, no matter how sophisticated those hierarchies get?
It's a good question.
To think about, right?
Definitely.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.